Yeah, look, don't you think the world is going somewhere wrong? I'm not saying it's all bad and the world is going to a complete and total dark asshole. No, the world just been pretty bad place lately. Jungle Man's here, let's get into the thick of it. Let's talk about masculinity in relationships. Have you ever thought that lately the word masculinity has been used as an insult to guys who are trying to stick to traditional values? Well, if you start looking at where the word masculinity comes from, which is Latin for masculinus or musculus, it's masculine, isn't it? Now, if anything, I'm not going to open America or go into the scientific and social maze, but I just want to say in this little podcast what I think about the way some words have been used recently that try to insult or belittle white cisgender men as much as possible, which I really don't like, because I'm a white cisgender man myself. In general, I would like to touch on the very concept of toxic masculinity that we hear more and more often lately. So where did it all start? Let's literally look into the history of this term and see that it was introduced by a man like Shepard Bliss back in the 10th century, 1980. So what does the term itself define and what is the meaning behind it? And under the term toxic masculinity is the display of power to humiliate those who are weaker, and specifically women, the elderly, children, and also, as it turned out, men. You also fall under the humiliation of toxic masculinity men simply because they are stronger than you. Well, are we going to take the offense? Okay, let's put the joke aside for a bit and look at the term itself. If anything, it doesn't have a clear definition, and what I told you before is not a clear term. It's just an approximate interpretation of the expression. That is, everyone kind of understands what is usually called toxic masculinity, but still everyone understands it differently, so everyone has its own truth, and it's correct, because there is no true interpretation or definition, so we get a rather unfair expression, which can be interpreted in almost any context that is convenient for a person. A simple situation: you're riding in the subway, you see a girl with heavy bags. A simple situation: you're riding in the subway, you see a girl with heavy bags, you decide to give way to her out of politeness. As a result, you get a number of accusations in your direction from a man who only wanted to make it easier. You only got a bunch of insults. Quite an unpleasant situation, looking at which you begin to wonder why everything is like this, why strong man has become so much the beast in society. And then what to do in such a situation? Ironically, in addition to term toxic masculinity, there's also a much more rare term, heroic masculinity, which is supposed to be the opposite of the first, but hehehe, I will not spoil it yet. Let's see what is in general. Heroic masculinity is a concept that is often associated with ideals of strength, courage, and defense. The term describes qualities and characteristics that are often attributed to men, especially in the context of historical and literary images. However, in contemporary society, the concept of heroic masculinity is increasingly being criticized and redefined. Initially, heroic masculinity was associated with images of knights, warriors, and other physically strong and brave men who performed feats and protected their fellow men. However, as society evolved and values changed, the concept became more complex and multifaceted. In modern terms, heroic masculinity encompasses not only physical strength, but also emotional fortitude, intellectual expressiveness, and social responsibility. This means that a man who conforms to this ideal is not only physically powerful, but is also able to express his emotions, be empathetic and caring, and take an active part in social and cultural life. Heroic masculinity also involves the ability to sacrifice and protect the weak. This may be expressed not only by physical protection, but also in supporting and defending the rights and interests of others, especially those who are vulnerable. However, it is important to note Like heroic masculinity does not mean suppression of emotions or aggressive behavior. The modern hero includes the capacity of self-knowledge and control over one's actions, as well as respect for others and the ability to resolve conflicts peacefully. In sum, heroic masculinity is not a static ideal, but rather a set of qualities that men can display in different situations and contexts. This concept helps to create a positive view of courage and strength based on ethics, justice, and social responsibility. Okay, sorted out of the second term, and now look, in what I've told you about the term, do you find some similar traits that fit both toxic and heroic masculinity? Specifically, shows strength to protect the weak, which immediately puts you in the position of someone who is stronger than someone else. Of course, if you analyze the situation with the fact that on the toxic masculinity can mean only aggressive imposition of his strength in front of other people, and under heroic want to say that you do from self-sacrifice to help. But we still get into the most basic problem of these terminologies, namely that absolutely every person interprets all this in its own way, and his interpretation is likely to not coincidence with ours, from which we get into a situation, as an example with the fact that you are going to give away, but in the end, the person might take it as you imposing your position of power on them. Now let's touch on our favorite social media, our YouTubes, TikToks, tweets and Instagrams, and especially media, because that's where we mostly see the fight against toxic masculinity. So how does the media paint toxic masculinity in front of us, stereotyping masculinity? Media often presents certain ideals of masculinity that may be unrealistic or even harmful. These ideals may include aggressive behavior, suppression of emotions, disdain for women or other men, and other aspects that can fit an image of toxic masculinity, even though there is really nothing of the sort. When they try to show us a man in a certain image, that he is bad, dominant, and should be banned in general, then maybe we should think about the fact that these media are not trying to play on your emotions, because on negative emotions it is easy to play and control a person, so that he does not go deeper into this or that topic, and try to open your mind a little more and read more sources. Let's take the situation in the subway again. Sorry, it is just the first thing that comes to mind. A man sits with his legs spread, or as it became known, man spreading. Girls consider it manifestation of toxic masculinity, when in fact, simply because of man biology, we're just purely physically comfortable to sit with legs spread, just so that we have nothing downstairs, was not squeezed and blood circulated safely. Influence on public opinion. Media has a huge influence on what stereotypes and ideals of masculinity are propagated in society. Film, television, advertising, and social media can reinforce toxic representation of masculinity and contribute to the creation of negative social norms, making it easier for the media to portray some men who play sports for their own pleasure, and not only for themselves, that they're only doing it to humiliate others. The effect on the younger generation. Oh, it is not going to be said that is a generation of stupid and uneducated people. In fact, children have always been, are and will always be. The problem is that they're especially important for the media to expose and combat toxic masculinity among the younger generation. Children and teenagers can easily be influenced by the media and take toxic masculinity for what it may not actually be, making a sandwich of facts, some of which will be true and some of which will be false. And since young people are never interested in learning more about an issue that they are told, they end up believing absolutely everything they are told. This can lead to negative beliefs and behavioral patterns. These are the methods on the media to form a special kind of thinking among its listeners and readers. And no matter how much try to bring in information to such people, It will reach them either after a long period of time, or it will not reach them at all. So the person will remain in his wrong paradigm on thinking. Well, let's not deny that toxic masculinity exists. I don't deny it, because it does exist. But you have to be able to recognize it and not confuse it with the virtue. So what can help us get rid of toxic masculinity? Developing emotional literacy. Challenging the misinterpretation and representation of toxic masculinity in the media can also contribute to the development of emotional literacy in the people. This includes being able to express someone's feelings and emotions, being open to empathy and understanding, and accepting one's vulnerability as a natural part of the human experience. That one should be able to accept help for accepting one's weakness. Openness in the family. If the family adheres to at least the basic principles of family values, such as helping loved ones, acceptance of the weak, compassion and kindness, it will not help you to rise a morally healthy person, but will also help such a person to do some simple but kind acts to help others in life. And the more such people and families we have, and easier it will be for humankind to live. This is where I'm going to say goodbye to you. If you are interested in listening to this little podcast, I will be glad to have some likes and comments. They really help the channel a lot, especially if you are new to the channel. I will be glad to have your subscription. I also have Twitter, which you can subscribe to, where I periodically post some obscure posts and notify you about the release of new videos. Bye everyone, see you in the next video.